Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time, we're going to be taking a look at The Diary of a Young Girl by Anne Frank.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And I'm really excited about this one.
This is a great one.
Yeah. It's one of those books that I feel like almost everybody has at least heard of.
Right.
And a lot of people have read in school.
Yeah.
But to actually like go through it and really try to glean what we can from it is going to be really interesting.
Absolutely. And I think, there's a difference between reading something when you're told to read it and going back and looking at it as an adult
Yeah.
with different eyes.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So we're going to be looking at excerpts from the diary
Yeah.
and just kind of talking about
Huh.
what life was like for Anne and the other people hiding with her in that secret annex.
Yeah, it's so interesting because, like you said, everybody knows the story.
Right?
Everybody's heard of Anne Frank.
Right.
But to actually, go back and read her words and see what she was going through on a daily basis, it's heartbreaking and uplifting at the same time.
Yeah, definitely. And what's crazy is that like she starts off the diary like she's just a normal teenager.
I know.
Like she's talking about boys and her friends and
It's so relatable.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like reading any teenager's diary today almost.
right. And she's got this little crush on this boy named Hello.
Yeah.
Um and she even says like she thinks he's in love with her.
Oh, she was smitten.
Yeah, and it's just like it's kind of funny to think about that. That even with everything going on, she's still, a girl with a crush.
Right, exactly. And it kind of shows you, even in the midst of, all this horrible stuff going on,
Yeah.
life still goes on.
Yeah.
People still have their,
Yeah.
little crushes and their dramas. And,
Yeah.
it's just fascinating.
Yeah, so it starts off normal, but pretty quickly things change.
Yeah, they take a very dark turn.
Yeah, because Margot,
Well, sister.
Anne's sister,
Yeah.
receives this call-up notice. Oh. And so they have to go into hiding.
Right. And I think it's important to remember
Yeah.
for listeners who maybe aren't as familiar with this period in history,
Yeah.
a call-up notice basically meant you were being summoned by the Nazi authorities.
Right.
And for Jewish people, that often meant being sent to concentration camps.
Yeah, it was basically like their death sentence.
Yeah, exactly.
So you can imagine the panic
Oh, absolutely.
that must have set in when that notice arrived.
Yeah, everything changes in an instant.
Yeah. And so they pack up like the bare essentials.
Right. They have to leave almost everything behind.
Yeah, and it's interesting because Anne writes about having to choose between, like saving dresses
Yeah.
or saving like photo albums and like precious memories.
Right.
And she chooses the memories.
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine
Yeah.
having to make that choice as a 13-year-old?
Yeah, it really shows like that even at that age, she understood
Yeah.
what truly mattered.
It's like she knew instinctively that experiences and memories were more valuable than any material possession.
Exactly.
And that just blows my mind.
Yeah.
A 13-year-old.
Yeah. So they end up in this secret annex.
Right.
Which is where they're going to be spending the next
2 years.
2 years.
Oh, God.
So paint us a picture. Like what is this place like?
Okay, so picture this. You've got this small, cramped space above Otto Frank's business.
Okay.
Okay? Tucked away behind a bookcase,
Wow.
like a secret passage.
Yeah.
And there are 8 people living there in secret.
8 people.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a lot of people.
It is a lot of people in a very small space.
Yeah.
You've got the Franks themselves, Anne, Margot, Otto, Edith,
Okay.
the Van Danes, Mr. and Miss Van Daan, and their son Peter.
Okay.
And then later on, they're joined by Mr. Dussel, a dentist.
So 8 people.
8 people all cooped up together.
Wow, that must have been intense.
Oh, they had to be completely silent during the day
Yeah.
to avoid detection.
So they couldn't even like talk.
No, not during the day.
Wow.
They had to be so careful.
Yeah. And on top of that, they also had to come up with a cover story
Right.
to explain where they went.
Exactly. They had to make it look like they had escaped to Switzerland.
Okay.
Mr. Van Daan even left a fake clue,
Oh, wow.
an address in Maastricht.
Wow. So they really went all out.
They had to, their lives depended on it.
Yeah. It's like something out of a spy movie.
I know, right? Except with much higher stakes.
Yeah, definitely. So we've got this tiny annex.
Right.
Constant fear of being discovered.
Yeah.
But what's amazing is that Anne still finds humor in these everyday moments.
She does. It's incredible.
Yeah, it really shows like the resilience of the human spirit.
It does. The ability to find joy even in the darkest of times.
Right, and she talks about like Peter's very thorough bathing routine.
Oh, yeah.
Where he wouldn't let anybody pass the kitchen.
For like half an hour?
Yeah.
While he was in the tub?
It's like, come on, Peter.
I know.
I gotta go.
Right.
So it's these little details that just make it so real and relatable.
They do. It's like you can almost picture them all crammed in this tiny space.
Yeah.
Trying to live their lives as normally as possible.
Yeah, and then there's the time that Anne and Peter decide to dress up in each other's clothes.
Oh, yeah, that's a classic.
Yeah, can you imagine, like, being a teenager cooped up with a boy you barely know?
Right.
And deciding to swap outfits for a laugh?
It's hilarious.
Yeah, and it's like, even in these really serious circumstances, they find ways to have fun.
Exactly. It's like a little bit of light in the darkness.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, but of course it wouldn't be real life without some drama.
Oh, of course not.
Right, and Anne's diary is full of it, especially when it comes to her relationships with the adults.
Oh, yeah, she doesn't hold back.
No, she does not. And her descriptions of them are so funny.
And witty.
Yeah, she talks about Mr. Van Dane looking like a butcher when he's preparing meat.
I love that one.
Yeah, and Mrs. Van Dane giving her a ton lashing.
Yeah, she was not afraid to call people out.
No, she was not.
Even the adults.
It's like she's got this like really keen eye for observing people.
She does.
And, you know, and picking up on those little details that make them who they are.
Yeah, and it's what makes her writing so compelling.
Right.
You know, she doesn't just tell us what happened.
Right.
She makes us feel like we're right there with her.
Yeah, and you know, those feelings are really evident in her relationships.
Definitely.
Especially with her mother and Peter.
Those are two of the most complex relationships in the diary.
Yeah, they go through a lot of ups and downs.
Yeah.
Like, she starts off being pretty critical of her mother.
Yeah.
She sees her as being out of touch.
Right.
But then as time goes on, she starts to understand her better.
She does.
And even, you know, recognizes her own role in their strained relationship.
She has this moment of self-awareness where she writes,
Yeah.
I didn't understand her, but she didn't understand me either.
Yeah, and it's just like this simple statement, but it reveals so much about Anne's growth.
I know, right?
And her willingness to take responsibility.
Yeah, for her part in the conflict.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder, like, how much of this growth was influenced by their confinement?
That's a good question.
Yeah, like, did being trapped together in this intense situation force them to confront their issues more directly?
I think it definitely played a role.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't escape each other when you're living in such close quarters.
Right.
So it forces you to deal with things.
Yeah, and then there's Peter.
Peter.
Right.
Right?
Like, that's a whole other story.
That is a whole other
Starts off with annoyance.
Yeah.
And then evolves into something much deeper.
Yeah. Their relationship is a fascinating one for sure.
Yeah, and it's like, it happens at the same time as she's, like, really starting to figure out who she is.
Right, exactly. Like her relationship with Peter is developing alongside this, you know, growing understanding of herself.
Right.
And her place in the world.
And she's starting to think about, you know, like what it means to be a woman.
Exactly.
And what society expects of her.
Yeah, she really grapples with those questions.
Yeah.
You know, especially for that time period.
Right.
It was a very different world for women.
Right.
Back then.
And she even writes a whole poem about it.
Right. She does. It's a really powerful poem.
Yeah.
Where she talks about, you know, challenging these traditional roles.
Yeah.
You know, she doesn't just want to get married and have children.
Right.
She wants something more.
Yeah, she wants to be a journalist.
She does.
Right.
She wants to make a difference in the world.
Yeah, she even says, like, I want to go on living even after my death.
Yes. That is one of her most famous quotes.
Yeah.
And it's so powerful because it shows you, like, how much she wanted to leave her mark.
Right. And considering everything she was going through.
I know.
To still have that kind of drive and ambition.
It's incredible.
It's really amazing.
It's like she refused to let her circumstances define her.
Yeah.
You know, she had this inner strength that just shines through in her writing.
Yeah. And speaking of strength, let's talk about her relationship with Peter a little bit more.
Okay, yeah.
Because they start to share these really intimate conversations.
They do. They really open up to each other.
Yeah.
And confide in each other about their fears and their hopes for the future.
And there's even a point where Anne says that she trusts Peter completely.
She does.
Which is, you know, it's a pretty big deal considering everything.
Right. Like they built this really strong bond.
Right.
In this incredibly intense situation.
Yeah, but it's not all smooth sailing.
Of course not.
Right, because Otto Frank starts to notice that they're getting close.
Yeah, he gets a little concerned.
Yeah, and he even talks to Anne about it.
Yeah, he basically warns her that, you know, their situation is unique.
Right.
And that their emotions might be amplified because of their confinement.
Yeah, like maybe they wouldn't be feeling this way
Exactly.
if they weren't stuck in this annex together.
Yeah, it's a valid point.
Yeah, and it's something that Anne herself starts to think about.
Right. She starts to question her feelings and wonder if they're genuine.
Right, or if they're just a product of their circumstances.
Exactly.
And eventually she decides to create some distance between them.
She does.
Which is, you know...
It's a mature decision.
It is.
For a girl her age.
Yeah, and it shows, like, that she's really trying to think things through.
Right. She's not just letting her emotions run wild.
Yeah.
She's trying to be rational.
Yeah, and I think it also shows that even in the midst of, you know, like, this shared hardship.
Yeah.
That personal boundaries are still important.
They are, absolutely.
Right? Like, you still need to have your own space.
Yeah.
And your own time.
Even when you're sharing a tiny annex.
Right, exactly.
With 7 other people.
Okay, so we've been talking a lot about Anne's personal life.
Yeah.
And her relationships.
Right.
But we can't forget about the bigger picture.
Right.
Like, what's happening in the world outside the annex?
Yeah, the war is still raging on.
Right. And it's seeping into their lives in so many ways.
Absolutely.
Like Mr. Dussel is bringing news from the outside.
Right, he's their only connection to the outside world.
And he's telling them about the horrors.
Yeah.
That other Jewish people are facing.
Right. And it's not good news.
No, it's not.
It's getting worse and worse.
Yeah, and then there's the constant fear of raids.
Yeah, they're always on edge.
Yeah.
Wondering if they're going to be discovered.
Right. And the rationing is affecting their food supply.
Yeah, they're running out of food.
Yeah.
They're hungry.
So things are getting pretty desperate.
Yeah. It's a really tough situation.
Yeah. And then there's the Allied invasion.
Oh, yeah. Right.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
Yeah, which is like this huge source of hope.
Yeah.
For them.
They're pinning all their hopes on it.
Yeah.
Thinking that it's going to be their salvation.
Right.
That it's going to bring them freedom.
But it's also a source of anxiety.
Of course.
Right. Because they don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
If the Allies are successful.
Like, what if the Germans decide to evacuate Amsterdam?
Exactly. What will happen to them?
And as time goes on, you can really sense that their hope is starting to waver.
Yeah. The reality of their situation is setting in.
Yeah.
And it's not looking good.
And then there are these two events that happen.
Okay.
That are like major setbacks.
Yeah.
First, the assassination attempt on Hitler fails.
That was a huge blow.
Yeah.
They were devastated.
And then they start hearing about this growing anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
Even among people that they thought they could trust.
It's like their world is crumbling around them.
Yeah, it's really heartbreaking to read about.
It is. It's like their faith in humanity is being shattered.
Yeah, and through it all, Anne's diary becomes this like lifeline for her.
It does. It's her outlet.
Yeah, it's where she processes her emotions.
Right.
And, you know, finds solace and draws strength.
It's her confidant.
Yeah, and she even calls it her memory book.
She does.
Yeah.
She knows how important it is to document her experiences.
Yeah, like she understands that her words have power.
Exactly.
And that she wants to share her story with the world.
And thank goodness she did.
Yeah.
Because her diary has touched so many lives.
Okay, so we come to her final diary entry.
Okay.
It's August 1st, 1944.
Yeah.
And she's writing about her longing for freedom.
Right.
Her belief in the good of mankind.
Yeah.
And there's this incredible sense of hope.
Yeah.
And resilience in her words.
It's really powerful.
And then silence. Yeah. And it's just crazy to think that, like, just days after she wrote that entry, the annex was raided and everyone inside was arrested.
It's like her story just stops abruptly.
And knowing that makes that final entry even more powerful.
It does.
You know, because it's like she's clinging to this hope and this belief in humanity.
Yeah.
But then it's just gone.
It's almost like her diary ends with an ellipsis.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
A story unfinished.
Yeah.
A life tragically interrupted.
Yeah, it's really heartbreaking.
It is.
But even though her time in hiding ended so abruptly, her voice, her spirit continues to reach people all over the world.
It's amazing.
Even today.
Yeah. What about that last entry speaks to you?
I think for me, it's her unwavering belief in freedom.
Yeah.
You know, even after everything she's endured,
she
still believes that it's possible.
It's incredible.
Yeah, she writes, I know that I'm a woman with inner strength and a great deal of courage.
And right after that, she talks about making her voice heard.
Yeah.
You know, working for all mankind.
Yeah.
Like, even in the face of all this horror,
she
still believes in the good of humanity.
Yeah. It's pretty amazing.
It is.
And it makes you think about, you know, like how those experiences in hiding shaped her worldview.
Right. Like, how did all of that contribute to the enduring power of her diary?
Yeah, like why is it that people are still reading it
Yeah.
and learning from it all these years later?
It's a good question.
What do you think?
Well, I think maybe it was the isolation,
Right.
the forced introspection that
Yeah.
allowed Anne to develop such a deep sense of self-awareness.
Yeah.
Maybe it was the contrast
Okay.
between the horrors of war
Yeah.
and the simple joys of life.
Yeah.
A shared laugh.
Right.
A moment of intimacy.
Yeah.
You know, those things probably felt even more precious
Yeah, definitely.
in that environment. And maybe that's why her writing resonates so strongly.
Yeah, I think you're right.
It's like she captures the beauty and the fragility
Yeah.
of the human experience.
And whatever the reason,
Yeah.
Anne Frank's diary continues to captivate and challenge readers.
It does.
Even today.
Absolutely.
It's a reminder of the importance of listening to personal stories
Yeah.
like hers
Right.
and understanding the impact of intolerance and hate
Yeah.
and celebrating the resilience of the human spirit.
I think that's a great takeaway. As we wrap up this deep dive, I encourage everyone listening to reflect on Anne's story and how it relates to our own time.
Yeah.
You know, what lessons can we learn from her experience?
Yeah, that's a great question.
How can we each, in our own way,